Hello, family and friends. It's 4:30. Thank you for meeting me here. Gotten this far in your day. I'm also grateful that you've gotten this far in your life. Reggie, thank you for being here. Yesterday was the 1st of May. Yeah, back at you. Yesterday was the 1st of May and a celebration of new life, new beginnings. For us circus folks, we don't have rookies, we don't have newbies, we have 1st of Mays. It's where we start from in the circus world. Today, I'm flipping that coin over. So from the celebration side to the other side. And the topic today is good grief. Really, it's just grief. Grief. Grief, as I see it, is one of the mixtures in the cocktail of depression. And we're in a space right now with things having changed so dramatically that there are many of us who are dealing with grief and not even knowing it. Some of us might even be calling it depression. Some of us might be calling it ennui, if you want to get all high up there on it. There are many different ways of looking at it. Grief is a deep sorrow. Usually it's seen or discovered or recognized in a loss of a close friend, family member, partner. But grief can be experienced with the loss of anything. And we have lost some things, folks. We have lost normal. We have gained a new normal. And I laughed that out because that just sat really heavy on my diaphragm when I said we have lost normal, just thinking about that. And that is my compensator for grief. That is my compensator for that really heavy space of dealing with that. Now, you'll see if you're on, I haven't done it on Instagram, but on Facebook, in the description of this, I put a link to a helpline. It has a bunch of helplines for different things in that wonderful grief sandwich, whether it's depression, alcoholism, any of the stuff that you might be going through. There's a helpline for that, and even abuse, grief. So there are many ways of dealing with that. A lot of things that we're taught, because we don't have a grief process. There are in certain cultures, there are ways of handling that grief. Sometimes you sit, in some cultures, you sit for a certain period of time with black on, and in that place of austere quietness, so that you can honor that which you are grieving for. And usually it's a person. So first of all, just identifying where you're at, understanding that grief is a real thing. It will join you at the dinner table. It will be with you when you brush your teeth. You won't see it, but you'll feel it. And understanding that will help you to realize that you're not going crazy, that you're not losing it in this space. And there are folks out there, if you're on social media enough, there are folks out there who are there for you, your friends, your family. Last week, I saw that some folks were putting up a story saying that if you message them and say that you're ready for something, and there's a code word, so that they know that means you need help. Whether you're in an abusive situation, you need to get out. Whether you're stuck in all alone, and you need somebody to come to your aid. There are ways of doing that, even in this space of social distancing. And Kim, yes. So the crazy thing, though, and in the grief sandwich that we're building, is we have social distancing, and some of us are actually learning emotional distancing. that we're not, and not just from others, but from ourselves, we're not dealing with our emotions. We're letting them, some of them times running rampant. They're going crazy, and we're just, I'm gonna push that aside. I'm not gonna deal with it. And that isn't healthy either. Emotional distancing is detrimental to your health. Dealing with this, and there are ways, let me tell you, it's not a popular thing in the Black community, but I do regularly speak to a counselor. Now it's through video chats. Before it was in person. We were twice a month usually, because guess what? I'm going through stuff too. We all are. If you're live, you're going through it. And some of the stuff that I'm unpacking, I didn't bring to the table. I didn't bring into the conversation. It came through the family. It came through history. And you say, what are you talking about? In some of the grief that I'm dealing with is stepping past the stereotypes of the Black father or the Black man. You say, what are you stepping past? So I worked my butt off through a good portion of my life to be stronger, faster, more powerful. What I didn't realize was I was falling right into the stereotype of the Black stud. And I thought, well, yeah, I'm a stud. I never thought of how degrading that was. That the Black stud is the same as the stud in the barn, is the same as the livestock. And that has been sometimes even passed down by other Black men as a sign of honor. Yeah, stud. And you know what? It's not. It's degrading. And to live through that is a grief that I had to deal with. To live through the fact that Black fathers run away. My dad never ran away. He didn't run. He was there. He worked his butt off. And I watched my uncles, my other family members. They were there. Some of them in the best way they could. So I lived with that stereotype. I accepted that stereotype, and it wasn't truth. It wasn't my truth. And I have to deal with the grief of the dying of that story and letting it die and letting myself rise up in a different healthy space. Right now, we're dealing with the grief of where we are. Some of us may actually have lost their jobs. You're stay at home now. Your job may not come back once this is all over. There's a grief there, especially if it's something that your livelihood is something that boisters you. If you're in the realm of performing arts like I am, and that job is gone, your existence changes. It doesn't change who you are. Remember, you are enough. You are perfectly who you are. But how you are and where you are in the world changes when you lose that job, when you lose that relationship, when you lose all the things there's so many of those things. Once again, you'll hear me call it, it's a Dagwood sandwich. That thing is big and the grief is real. And a lot of times we bite into it not knowing what it is, and we eat it whole and we consume it and it becomes us. And then we don't know how to deal with that grief. So just like the celebration, and here's a great place. I'm going to flip that coin over again because it's a double-sided coin. Underneath there's the depression, the grief, the darkness, or whatever. And then on top, the other side is that celebration. Once you've gained that help, when you've spoken, it may not feel so wonderful, but just say thank you to you. Celebrate the you that said, I need help. I need help. We're not encouraged to do that. Why? Because we're supposed to do it all on our own. We're supposed to, what foolishness is that? We're supposed to do it all on our own. You're here for a reason, and that's because we're going to do this together. We're going to do life together. Not necessarily holding being hand in hand, holding hands and linking arms all the time, but we're connecting right now so that we can do this together. And we can bring a new, healthy vitality to this earth, to the community that you're in, the house that you're in, and then the earth all around. This is how that grief is nourishment for your soul and not a cancer or a detractor for who you are. Grief can be powerful and grief can be empowering. you do have to deal with it. And dealing with it is done in many different ways. Sometimes it's getting help, sometimes it's sitting with it. And for me, I did both. I went and sought help, but I also spent a lot of time just sitting with that grief. I might tear up on you right here because I can remember what it was. I can remember going there. I remember sitting in my meditations. The dog is scratching over there if you hear some jingling. I remember sitting in my meditation. I would go into the woods and I'd meditate, and I'd sit sometimes half an hour, sometimes only 5 minutes. And I would ask each time, grief, what do you have to teach me today? And then I stopped putting on the today. What do you have to teach me? Because I was suffering and I needed to know. I needed to know what lessons I had to learn. And part of it, the lesson was to sit there with it. What I learned in the long run, now let me tell you that when I say I sat there with it, I sat there with it. And I was in that space and I suffered and learned and grew and learned how to thrive in that space. And you say, for how long? It wasn't a week. It wasn't a month. It wasn't a year. 2 years. 2 years of processing what that was. And just when I thought, man, I got through this, I had to suffer another great loss. And that was my mother. Coming in end of June, it will be 2 years. Still working through that. Still working through that. I have a poem, 2 poems that I'd like to read for you today. There is a third, which I had written. I have not published. I've shared with some folks, and it's about the loss of a child. And I am not going to share that one with you just yet because I want to keep sending it out personally to folks who I really think it needs to go to before I put it out for the general public. The first poem that I'm reading to you is from Sacred and Sacrosanct. The poem is called Pain. The result of toil and wear has born in me a parasitic presence that feeds on my soul. Constantly it gnaws on hope and joy, eroding all but the want of its departure. Wearing away, I long for its absence, a moment's rest. I would accept nothing if it meant being devoid of this. Simplicity no longer exists. The parasite has attached itself to simple, making it anything but. Who was I before? Will I ever be again? You are not, my friend. Go away. Your presence does not make me stronger. Go away. Only in your absence will I be stronger. I could use that strength to fight you now. As silently as you arrived, will you please leave? Kim, thank you for sharing that. So Kim on Facebook says that she ran away from grief for 10 years and would not recommend that. And yeah, and grief comes in, like I said, comes in many forms from many different things. Usually a great loss, and it's trauma. It is an emotion. It's emotional trauma. So when you run from it, when you don't actually address it and deal with it, you will wind up with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorders. Triggers that cause you to do certain things. You'll find that in relationships, there will be triggers that will cause you to do unhealthy things for that relationship and possibly for yourself. And that doesn't mean drastic, dramatic, but even the little unhealthy thing, because a little unhealthy is still unhealthy. Let me tell you here, if you don't believe that, just take a glass of water, a little glass of water, and just drop one little drop of something unhealthy in it. Will you drink it? Why not? Exactly. And that's that little drop, that little nugget of unhealthy in whatever, the slightest of griefs, the lightest of things that constantly will feed and flow. We are 90-something% water, seawater, salt water. All right, I'm going to read one more poem. It's as yet unpublished poem. I may not make it through because this one I struggle with. The poem is entitled 12/27/42 07/30/18. I was born to be a prostitute. I knew this was who I would be when grandma walked 10 miles to clean houses 7 days a week. I knew this is who I would be when great grandma died and the family inherited the burden of putting her in the ground and putting food on the table. I knew this is who I would be when my body started to change and the tickle fights got messy. The boys started acting like men and the men started treating me like fruit. I knew this is who I would be when the men bruised my flesh and it was my fault for being too fine, too cute. I knew this is who I would be when I first heard the darker the fruit, the sweeter the juice. I knew this is who I would be when I cried for help and they cleaned me up so my herders could have a second helping. I knew this is who I would be when I cried for help and I was reassured that love is like that sometimes. I knew this is who I would be when I shot the man who hurt me and no one cared why, and I was sentenced to die. And no one could see that I was broken, swept into the corner with no words spoken. The coffee stain on the coffee table, a nuisance easily covered with a coaster. I was born to be a prostitute for your pleasure. Grandma was born with nothing and died with less. The least I could do is lift my dress, and maybe I could leave my baby something to forget me with. I was born to be a prostitute. When grandma walked 10 miles home to cook and clean for her own. When grandma died and there was no one left to see how brilliant my mind is. When the men started touching me and I liked that someone could see me. When I stopped hearing the word love and no one seemed to miss it. I was born to be a prostitute when he hit me. He hit me. He hit me. When I made him stop, they gave me this number. It sure does seem like the world needs a prostitute. That one was inspired. Hold on, I'll let it just sit for a moment. That was inspired by hearing a news report on the radio, and it was about a woman who was sentenced for killing her abuser, someone who had raped her multiple times, and she could not stand it any longer, and she killed him. But then she was sentenced, and no one had done anything to stop what was happening, and so that was an outpouring of grief. I later heard that they reduced her sentence. I don't think they cleaned it, but they reduced it. And that just, I mean, it's like, wow, that struck me. That's a story that's out there. And I could fight and fight and fight, or I could put into art and share this over and over again. And this is my grief personified. I grieve at losing that connection with this person, but gaining something else. Grief, it's real. If you are dealing with it, if you feel like you're in its clutches, if you're dealing with, you can give it a name. First of all, give it a name. If it's grief, give it that name. If it's depression, give it that name. It could look like frustration. It could come out like anger. It's like I said, it's the Dagwood sandwich. It is the mix. It's the cocktail of unhealthy when not dealt with properly. You have the power. And that power is to get help. That power is to strengthen you in a way that is healthy, which is understanding that that is one portion. So I talked about the flip side of the coin. Celebrate the happy on one side, the darkness on the other. That is one portion of it. And when we start to put everything back into balance, you're still going to deal with grief. You're still going to deal with the depression, the downside, but you're also going to ride up and use the upside. And you won't get stuck on either one. And no, you hardly people hardly complain about getting stuck on the up part. But when you plateau, you plateau. If you're not going anywhere, stagnation is stagnation. If you're stagnant at the top, it doesn't feel well, it may feel a little better because you can pretend by buying things, buying your way out of spaces, but it doesn't feel that much better than stagnating in the middle or at the bottom. It's stagnation, and we need the undulation of life. We need the kundalini to rise. We need a way out and a way back and a way out. We need to create more doors than walls. We need to find a healthy way. Hopefully, this is helpful. Hopefully, you recognize that even though we are isolating, we are not alone. It's very different to be lonely and alone. And I hope that you are not lonely, even if you are alone. And if you are, I'm here 4:30 every day. You can also check out the Dreamer Station on YouTube with the playlist Philosophy. I think there's 46 videos there. I started a few years ago with these little 1-minute segments. If that helps, I hope it does. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for giving me 20 something minutes of your time, and stay home, stay safe, be well, stay sane, and remember that you are enough. Move forward with passion and purpose. Have a great day.